Hi everyone and welcome back to another video. In today's video we are checking out medical evacuation. I'm really interested to check this video out today and learn about what they do on a day-to-day basis. So yeah, let's get into today's video.
I'm going to be on this aircraft for the next 2 weeks, so I'm going to thoroughly check everything so I don't have to check it again. And also this aircraft's coming off of being at a far site for 2 weeks, so the medic that was on before me may not have been able to resupply stuff he was using. So I'm going to double check everything extra thoroughly. Our goal is to be off the ground here in 15 minutes, have the patient. We generally don't fly more than 15 to 30 minutes from this site, and then have them back at the FST within an hour getting surgical care. So if you get hurt in Afghanistan, you're pretty much guaranteed to get to a surgeon within an hour if we have anything to do with it.
As a pilot, as a PI, like we call it, I'll come out to the aircraft and get, myself and the crew chief will come out and we'll go ahead and get the aircraft run up all the way until engines start.
There it goes.
The sense of urgency, I mean, it depends on what we've got coming down. You're always going to have the question of how severe are the patients. If it's a point of injury, like we have a lot here, you're always going to consider the landing zone, security of the landing zone, and the landing zone itself. Is it going to be dust landing? If it's a dust landing, how severe is the dust? What kind of sloping terrain may we be landing on? What other mitigations do we have to think about? Such as if it's an IED blast, are there other IEDs out there? Are there mines if we're landing off the side of a road? There's all kinds of things that you have to run through your mind before you get out there. IED blasts predominantly here, so we do a lot of point of injuries, roadside. It's got a lot of different names to it, and local nationals stepping on landmines, local nationals having falls and things like that. You've seen how dark it gets here. Just imagine what it's like at, the village with no street lights and all that kind of stuff.
It's a little harder. The conditions are a little rougher, especially at night. We're not able to use white light, and it's a little bit bumpier than the back of an ambulance, but we manage.
Everyone that I work with is top-notch. We have medics that I see them do things that's like, how do you do that in the back of a helicopter? We could be in, a 60-degree bank and they're putting tubes down someone's throat or putting a needle into someone's chest and, flying extremely fast, going through G-forces, and for them to be able to do that, it blows my mind.
You would burn out really quickly if every patient you treated in here, you took home with you at the end of the day. Because, there's days you pick up 7 patients and you find out 2 hours later that 3 of them died. And if you took that home with you every day, you'd never make it through the deployment.
The chance to save another person's life and make sure that they get home, see their family again, that's extremely rewarding. This is the best mission in the Army as far as I'm concerned.
We're going to put a warm blanket on it, okay? Get a blanket. Pull this out from under. You go ahead and pull this blanket out.
These guys are well trained and they do a great job. The MEDEVAC crew brings them in. We have a separate crew that unloads them from the helicopter. They bring them into the station area where they're initially screened, looked at, and they're brought into our ATLS area. That's where we do the major evaluation on them. And then from there, we can either take them to the operating room if we need to, or we take them a little further to what we call the ICU area, where we just watch them and observe them. And I think that's where he's going to end up going.
IV, left forearm patent. Okay, press out with my lateral equal. Pulses.
One of our Afghan military, they were involved in a rollover with their vehicle, and initially were several injuries. 2 of them weren't bad enough to be brought here, but one of them was brought here, and he initially was reported to have a serious arm injury, head injury.
BP is 116/56.
We have 3 general surgeons, and I'm an orthopedic surgeon. We have a lot of medical capacity, more than what aid stations would have. So you're bringing these 4 doctors together who are used to working individually. Now we got to come together and work as a team. feel me touching you? Yeah, I can. Where am I touching you?
That collar.
Okay. As soon as a patient comes in, we have 5 or 6 people around that patient right away. They all got specific jobs. One guy's drawing blood, another person's doing IVs, another person's doing vitals, another one's clearing things, and then you got 2 or 3 doctors working on them, so you have to learn to work as a team.
You let us do all the lifting for you, okay?
FST is a forward surgical unit. Back when they first established these, say back in World War II, when you had a front line, the forward surgical team was right in back of the front line. They're actually on the edge of the battlefield. And as we're set up here in tents, it was meant to be a unit that can pick up and move. So as the battlefield would hopefully move forward, the unit, the FST, could pick up, move forward, stay with them, and be the first responders. Lateral of the forearm. Now here in this country, the same as when I was in Iraq, there isn't a front line per se, so we're a little bit more definitive, a little bit more stationary, but we're the first responders. I thought maybe there'd be a hairline fracture. We're looking at his x-rays now of his forearm, and I don't see any obvious fracture. We had separate x-rays coming of his hand, but it looks like, fortunately for him, he just has some cuts, bruises on his arm. We're going to clean those up, and we'll splint them, and we'll see how he does. The other thing we're going to need to do to watch with him with an injury is sometimes the arm can swell so much they can develop what we call a compartment syndrome. And what that is the swelling is so intense it actually cuts off the circulation to the hand. So sometimes we actually have to take him to surgery, make large incisions on the arm just to release the pressure. So after a trauma, that can develop anywhere from a couple hours to 10, 12, 14 hours after the injury. So we're going to watch him this time period to make sure he doesn't develop that. We cleared that his head was just a minor bump, so it was just cuts and contusions. So he was very fortunate. Oh, we got it here.
They're going to give a report to the flight nurse on all of the patients that came out of the CASF or the ward in the hospital that are going on the flight, because those patients will be her crew's responsibility.
Watch out for that too, Penny.
He's a D and it's a C-17, so he should be able to walk on.
I'm part of a critical care air transport team, also known as CCAT. And pretty much we take care of anyone that's critically ill or injured, transport them attached to an air medical evacuation crew, and fly those patients from the AOR to Germany.
Get ready, Pat, here. Make sure your seatbelts are fastened.
I like to think of the military as a brotherhood. The folks outside the wire are taking care of us, and our job is to take care of them when they get injured. So it's almost like you're taking care of a family member.
It is great to be a part of that. And that's one thing too that we forget. Even though we are medical, we wear the uniform. We're active duty at that point in time, and it is an honor to serve with these guys.
Our job here is crewing missions to the United States, and also recovering patients from downrange in Afghanistan and Iraq. We've got aeromedical evacuation crews, ground support, and critical care air transport teams.
As soon as the plane lands, our crew drives up, we load them up onto the bus and get them up to the hospital.
The acuity levels are quite high for patients coming downrange. These patients are not only stable, but some are only stabilized. They're a lot more critical. They could be hours out of an operating room type scenario, or out of a field hospital to have to come up to Germany for treatment. Sometimes 24 hours from the impact of injury to a field hospital to Germany. Sometimes these guys wake up and they're in Germany and barely recognize what happened to them and realize all the different levels of care they've gone through to get to where they're at.
All right, if you have any problems between now and then, I'll be here for you, okay? Thank you.
Get you back over there and you're Bob right away, huh?
I'm a no baby.
How long you here?
For 9 months. I've been here for 4. No pain? All right.
Once they arrive at Ramstein, they are brought over by ambulance to Landstuhl, where we receive them.
Did you get a count on litters?
We got 11 patients, 10 normal patients and 1 CCAT coming in.
We've known about their arrival for the last 24 hours and have been tracking their movements in a global patient movement system. Our team of nurses in the DWMIC discuss with the doctors before the patient's arrival their condition, what service they'll go to, medical service, surgical service, whether they need to go directly to the ICU. So all of those arrangements are known and made before the patient even steps foot in Germany.
Jacqueline Bush here. Welcome to Germany. Thanks for all you've done. Just focus on getting better and look after yourself. Anything we can do to help will really help you, okay?
Right away, we meet the buses that come in. They build a whole flight list, and so we know what kind of patients. We get a whole patient medical record. We can read about all their injuries, what to expect, how they've done, how they've been resuscitated. And then we get heads up for wheels down, and that means that the plane has landed at Ramstein, and then we hear en route, and the bus brings the patients over to front of the ER, where the ICU team, the nurse, will meet the patient, and then we accompany him up to the ICU.
Doing all right?
The levels of care go from 1 through 3 in the combat theater. Level 1 would be soldiers taking care of soldiers and the combat medics on the battlefield. Level 2 are what we would have the battalion aid stations where they enter the medical system. Many of the level 2s now also have surgical capability because that's been an emphasis to bring surgery as far forward as possible to try to stop bleeding and save lives. Level 3 are the deployed hospitals, and then level 4 is us.
Can you turn the monitor towards me a little bit?
We do it in a safe, controlled environment. We're not being mortared or rocketed here, and we have more capabilities here than they do downrange just by virtue of not being in a deployed setting per se. And then what we try to do is we try to decide then who needs to be evacuated back to CONUS for further treatment and recovery, who can be recovered here for a period, and who can go back to their job. Because again, our job also is not to just send everybody home. We're supposed to conserve the fighting strength. We're supposed to identify patients who may be able to go back to duty, and many patients want to do that.
I was in the front of my squad. We were walking down, and I was actually looking on the road. And I remember I looked forward, and right there, I just saw it. It was a directional IED. Started yelling at my squad, you know, get back, run. We got about 10, 15 meters away, and they blew it up. They set it off. I didn't black out or anything, but instantly I was on my face. I was on the ground. I couldn't really feel my arm or my legs. I didn't really know what happened. I was kind of shocked. I was in pain, but I couldn't even yell out I think I'm hit or anything like that. I just kind of laid there. One of the guys came up to me, one of my guys. I remember him yelling back at everybody else saying Hernandez is hit. He's bleeding out. I remember him putting some pressure on my leg. I remember him saying that my right arm was messed up. He's like, you're bleeding. He's like, man, he's bleeding everywhere. They dragged me quite a ways from what I remember. They kept having to switch out, just taking turns. They dragged me up onto the bird, and I was scared. I didn't know really what to think. It was the last thing I expected to happen that day was me end up being on a helicopters flying out from downrange. I was worried how bad it was. I didn't know how everything was. All I know is I'm looking up, I'm in pain, and people are just rushing around me, doing all this stuff, trying to give me medicine and telling me it's gonna be all right.
This isn't a race. Yeah, this is complete tortoise. Take your time. The plane will wait on you.
On the helicopter, I remember them trying to get me with an IV. They were having trouble. I know my body wasn't letting them. They kept trying to stick me, and I know they didn't give me morphine because like Corman said that I had a cut on the side. They thought I might have had something wrong with my lungs, so they couldn't give me morphine. So I remember just hoping that they can get that IV in and just give me some morphine for the pain. Thanks for everything.
Do you need me to print your med sheets or something?
By the time I landed, I was pretty drugged up. They had me feeling pretty good, and everything seemed to kind of go by in like a flash. Like every time I would blink my eyes, I felt like I was somewhere new. Like they were moving me, and more people were working on me. And the next thing I know, I was in the hospital, and they had like all my clothes off, and there were just people just lifting my legs, my arm, and just working. I remember telling the doctor that I wanted to go back out, and they said to me that I'm probably going to Germany, but I didn't really believe them at first. I just kind of like really wanted to be with my guys, and it kind of upset me just the fact that I was going to be coming back earlier before them. I really didn't want to, but I know it's best that I come back. So by the second day, I pretty much realized I had to. You know, I had to come to Germany, and I was going to be going back to the States.
I think it's an extremely rewarding job on one hand, because we're taking care of these people who have put their lives, their health on the line for their country. And so every day it is rewarding to try to do everything you can to get them home to their families and get them back as functional as you can, to give them as much of their life back as you can. What is the hardest part is seeing those patients that come through and you can't give them their life back. The patients with very severe burns, the patients with spinal cord injuries and paralysis, the patients with multiple amputations. Seeing these young men and women come through is an extremely hard thing to bear, but you know, I take comfort in knowing that we're trying to give them the best chance for the best life after those injuries that we can.
The hardest thing is just knowing I'm going to get to go back before them. Like, really don't want to, but, you know.
That's all we need in here, right?
We should be alerted roughly around 09:15 local. That means we have an hour to show from the time frame that we're called. Once we get here, being the charge med tech, which is going to be my role, what I'll do is I'll start making sure first that everyone has been alerted and that they've shown up. Once they get here, I'll start checking different items. One of them is the ORM sheet, operational risk management sheet, making sure that everyone signed off on that. We'll check the FAs, which is the flight authorizations, make sure everyone's been signed off on that. And then making sure that, in my case, I'll be double checking to make sure that the enlisted crew has their no-go items, has their publications, they're not missing any items. And basically that they're overall mentally and physically ready to fly. We'll have a nurse come in from the CASA. They'll explain to us what patients we're going to be having on board, and then one of the nurses will divvy those patients out and determine who's going to be taking what patients on the aircraft.
Hey, we're next. It's difficult. I find that people in my age, it's hard to see them in that situation. The best thing for me to do is to just try and stay focused on the job. Stick with my training, stick with my tasks of what I have to do for that mission to get that person where they need to go.
All right, guys, the floor first.
We're all qualified nurses before we ever get to the squadron, so it's special duty for us. So all of our nurses have generally worked in the intensive care units, ERs, cath labs, you name it. We have a wide variety of nurses, a wide variety of skill sets that we can use in flight. And our technicians are also very competent medical personnel. So you really don't know what you're going to get. Sometimes whenever you fly into Iraq, Afghanistan, you drop the ramp down, you're prepared to get 10 patients, but when you drop the ramp, you actually get 20. So you just mentally prepare yourself to handle whatever comes on board. And it's kind of normal for us to do that, so we don't really think about it.
She's over there. I'm a critical care nurse and a respiratory therapist, and we transport all the critically ill patients from Ramstein back to Washington, D.C. so they can get a higher echelon of care. We have to keep an eye on a lot of things, especially the ones with like the abdominal wounds. Because we're up at altitude, we have to make sure that the pressure doesn't build up. A lot of people with casts and stuff, we have to make sure that the pressure doesn't build up and cut off circulation. So being at altitude and in the back of a plane makes it a little more difficult because we don't have the x-ray, the CT scans, you know, all the wonderful stuff that you do at the hospital. We have a little machine that does lab work for us, basic labs, and we base a lot of things off of that. We have all of our monitors, our IV pumps, our ventilators. We have them hooked up to the KCI wound vacs. We've got the patients over there that have chest tubes coming out, that drain the fluid constantly. We just monitor all that and make sure there's no significant changes. If there are, then we need to do something.
Dangers for them, there is many dangers, of course. We do a lot of movement of the patient from the ICU to the gurney, then to the ambulance, from the ambulance to the plane, and so on. So with all that movement, you know, tubes like the endotracheal tube or IV lines or chest tube, they can get dislodged. And if that happens, that becomes an emergency right there. So we need to be very careful every time we transfer a patient. We need to make sure that all the lines are secure and that we don't commit any errors like that. Other than that, there is dangers with flight, you know, as we go up, elevation, changing pressures and all that. So we need to make sure before we fly that the patients don't have air between their lungs or air in their brain, because if we don't anticipate that, once we get to altitude, it can be very dangerous for them, and we will have to do procedures in flight.
Hello everyone, this is the captain. I just want to let you know that we've made it into U.S. airspace.
Boston Center welcomes you back to the United States. We're now United States airspace.
It's the best job in the world. I mean, I just love these boys and I love taking care of them. And it's kind of hard, but once you pick them up and package them, you have to turn a switch and you have to just become the nurse. But once you drop them off and after the mission, depending on what their problems were, sometimes you break down, sometimes you don't. But I kind of treat them like if it was my brother, you know, my uncle, my father. I mean, just the TLC. We do a lot of clinical stuff, but I know the touching and the fluffing, that goes a lot longer than, you know, the clinical, technical stuff that we do. Rank doesn't matter, job doesn't matter, nothing matters. To me, it's just somebody's brother or, you know, sister, and we take care of them all the same way.
1060 at 10, runway 1 left, clear to land.
Runway 1 left, clear to land, reach.
50.
Aircraft's forward.
It's very, very rewarding to bring these guys home. We've been doing it for about 5 years. I've been flying these airvacs prior to that. Of course, they weren't anything like what we're doing now, but it's very rewarding. You're bringing the guys and girls home.
When you land into Andrews and you're able to look them in the face and say welcome home, it's such a gratifying feeling that you really do come full circle, I feel like, where you get them at Ramstein and they're injured and they're just waiting to get home. So when you land at Andrews and you can tell them welcome home, and that for me seals the deal, and I'm able to go on.
That's the end, guys. I am amazed at so many different things that occurred in this video. It's just like, first of all, they've got such a well-oiled machine going on. Like, it's amazing that there's so many different people involved, but everyone knows what they're doing, and it's so efficient, because situations like this, you have to be efficient, right? So the fact that everything is so well oiled, everyone knows what they're doing, so well taken care of, it's amazing. And I can't imagine being out there and being injured, and just the fact that you're so far away from your family and friends and you don't know what's happening to you. It must be a really awful situation for you, but the fact that all of these nurses and doctors are so good at their job, not only on the practical side of things, but the fact that a lot of these nurses and doctors were talking about, you know, we treat the patients as if they're our brother or daughter, or, you know, a father, uncle, you know, and that just says a lot about the people who are working in this field. But it was really interesting to learn about the process, right, of where the patients go to, and the extent of the entire operation. It's just amazing. It's just amazing that these people, these doctors and nurses, they don't have a full range of what they need to treat patients, right? You know, they have to work on the go, work in situations or environments where they don't have everything a highly equipped hospital would have, you know what I mean? But they still manage to make it work. And transporting them from Germany to Washington DC, obviously that's a really long flight and high altitude, like they said, and it's like they don't even, the risks are higher, right? But they don't even have the same equipment as they would in a normal hospital. So the fact that they're doing all of this for these patients up in the air with very, very limited resources is absolutely amazing. And I can only imagine, like, the way that they are able to think on their feet, you know. You'd have to be so incredibly skilled to do this job and have so much knowledge about how the body works and what to do in different situations, right? And what to do if what you would normally do in that particular situation can't be done. So what can you do instead to alleviate the problem? You know what I mean? So yeah, please let me know what you guys thought about this video. I hope you guys found it as kind of heartwarming as I did. Really amazing what these people do, seriously. So yeah, leave a comment if you do want to, and if you've got anything to add, definitely feel free to leave a comment as well. But apart from that, thank you guys so much for watching this video with me today, and I will see you all in my next video. Bye guys.